Okay, so let's take a look at chapter 1.3, Implied Depth, Value, and Space. So I really like this artist. His name's David Schnell. He's a contemporary painter from Germany, and he uses all of these within his paintings, which are usually really large, to convince us of depth. The value in this case, the lights and the darks, the space, and also the perspective, which we'll talk about these three in depth. Okay, so let's go to value. Value is when the artist uses grayscale. They will have areas that have highlights and areas that are medium toned and some that are dark. And they illustrate this to make it look three-dimensional. A real popular technique during kind of Renaissance, late Renaissance, was called chiaroscuro, which is a time for light and dark. And here you can see this transition of the light source at the top with the highlight, and then it gradually becoming darker gray until we get the shadow that is the deepest, it's the furthest away from the light source, and then the cast shadow is also extremely dark. And that gives the illusion that, hey, this is not a circle and it's not flat, it's a sphere. Here's a painting by an artist who's really well known for doing chiaroscuro. His name's Caravaggio, and he likes to have a spotlight. Kind of if you go see someone perform on a stage and they have a spotlight on the singer. Here he has a spotlight on St. Paul and where he fell off of his horse, and this is coming from the book of Acts in the New Testament. And then once you get past the horse and Paul, they just kind of, there's these dark shadows. And so this is supposed to heighten our emotional response. Hatching and cross-hatching are also used to create depth. The direction of the lines can also, not just the value, but the direction of the lines can give us the illusion of depth. See how here the lines are kind of curved to make it feel rounded as a sphere, and this too is rounded, but just on the side and not on the top. And here we have cross-hatching with more lines to show a darker value. Here less lines, and then we would guess the light source is on the very top. All of these create the illusion of depth, and an artist can do that on really organic subject matter. In this case, we look at the preacher, where the rounding of the arm, the fingers, the face, all of that, the direction of those hatching lines, and the variation of light, medium, dark values are all evident to make it look 3D. So in space, the main one I want to show you is talking about mostly overlap and position. So when we look at this Rembrandt painting, you can tell that the overlap here of the side of the mountains is in front of the tree line, and if those trees are in front of another mountain range in the far back. Also, there's more detail in what's closest to us. This is not a very colorful image, but usually the colors are more detailed and vivid the closer it is to you, and the further away, the more it pushes back. So in this case, you could see the colors are more vivid and clear. Also, the size of the columns in the building are larger. And as we go back in space, it's not as visible, and the buildings become smaller. Okay, so in perspective, the two I want to talk about with you is first atmospheric and then linear. Atmospheric just means that kind of what we were just looking at. There's details up close, and further away, those details are blurred and it's not as sharp. And as it says, objects take a blue-gray middle value as they get further away. And you can see the richness of the colors here, and then they dissolve in the back. Linear perspective is actually where an artist is using a horizon line, and they're using a vanishing point from that line to make the architecture that you see. So let's look at those in depth. Here we have kindred spirits. Again, the detail up close, and we're still using overlap. But then as we go further back into the mountains, we can't see individual trees. We actually lose even the texture that we see to discern that there's trees in those mountains. They're less green, and this one actually looks like a bluish purple. So it pushes back in space, and so that's why they call it atmospheric. And it's almost as if the light creates a blanket over those mountains and making them more ambiguous. Now this is your example for linear perspective. I'm going to go ahead and go to this one. So basically the artist has a horizon line, and they'll take like a ruler, for example, and they'll measure out to make, in this case, if we look at the archway, the desk, even the pattern of the tile floor, they all follow that vanishing point on the horizon line to give the illusion of depth. And here's where an artist illustrates that as well, and they create the architecture that you see. So here's a student, it looks like maybe junior high or high school, and they have that vanishing point, and they're starting to create a road or a beach and a house. And it's a very simple technique. It's not too complicated to do. Masaccio also considered the vanishing point. He wanted for the average man height to be at the horizon line. So when you stand there at this painting, it's on a wall, when you look up, it would actually feel more three-dimensional. Two-point perspective uses two vanishing points on the horizon line, and this is actually a little bit closer to reality than one-point perspective. You can see that here. And three-point has a third point, but it's not on the horizon line, and that creates what we call either a bird's eye view or a frog's eye view. In this case, with the vanishing point below, it's a bird's eye view. It looks as though we're flying over the building. Here's a detail of that. So foreshortening is where you take, like in this case we see Superman, we take, his fist going forward and his arm plunging towards us, as his fist is what's closest to us. But we also believe that he has feet. We can't see his feet, but we understand the artist is foreshortening his body so that that fist really looks like it's coming towards us, and he's flying, so his body is not vertical, it's horizontal, and he's flying towards us, so his feet are pushed back behind him. All of those give us the illusion of depth. Sometimes foreshortening can be meaningful. Here, André painted Christ. He actually made his feet smaller so it wouldn't cover the body, since he was foreshortening it. But he wanted this, the body to emphasize, like from this viewpoint, the holes in his feet and in his hands, to push the sense of tragedy amongst, those two that are mourning on the left, and his thorax, like his stomach is swollen like you would think for a deceased person. And so this is more of an emotional purpose in foreshortening. Okay, that's it, and we'll stop there.